A few years ago, if someone had told you Honda would become one of the most talked about names in the EV market, most people probably would have laughed. Because Honda was never the company chasing futuristic headlines. It didn't build its reputation on risky experiments or flashy technology. Honda became powerful in a much quieter way: reliability. Millions of people trusted Honda because their cars simply worked, year after year, decade after decade. And that's exactly why what's happening right now feels so strange. While Tesla was busy turning electric cars into a global obsession, and BYD was rapidly taking over markets with cheaper battery technology, Honda stayed unusually quiet, almost too quiet. But then, without making a huge scene, Honda released the ENY1, and suddenly people started asking a question nobody expected a few years ago. Is Honda finally ready to enter the EV war for real? At first glance, the ENY1 doesn't look revolutionary, and honestly, that may be intentional. Honda understood something many companies ignored. Most normal buyers are not looking for a spaceship on wheels. They want something familiar, something comfortable, something that doesn't feel like a science experiment. That's why the ENY1 looks more like a clean, premium SUV than a futuristic concept car. The design is smooth, simple, and safe. Sharp LED lights, closed EV grille, hidden door handles, large touchscreen, quiet cabin. Everything about it feels carefully controlled. But the interesting part is not what Honda added, it's what Honda avoided. Because while other companies were trying to shock buyers with aggressive designs and giant performance numbers, Honda seemed focused on one thing only: trust. And that sounds smart until you realize how dangerous the timing actually is. Because Honda waited a very long time before fully stepping into EVs. Maybe too long. While companies like Tesla and BYD spent years building charging ecosystems, battery supply chains, and EV software, Honda continued dominating gasoline and hybrid markets. And for a while, that strategy worked perfectly. The company was still selling millions of vehicles globally. Customers still trusted the Civic, the CR-V, and Honda's engine reliability more than almost anything else on the road. But slowly, the world around Honda started changing. Fuel prices increased. Governments introduced stricter emissions rules. Cities started discussing bans on gasoline vehicles. And suddenly, the market Honda had controlled for decades no longer looked permanent. The problem wasn't that Honda was weak. The problem was that the entire industry was moving somewhere else. And this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. Because entering the EV market late creates a problem most people don't think about. When you arrive late, you don't just compete against cars anymore. You compete against ecosystems. Tesla already had software advantages, charging networks, and a loyal fan base. BYD had battery manufacturing power and lower prices. Even Toyota had already built years of hybrid credibility into its EV transition. So Honda faced a brutal reality. Reliability alone might not be enough anymore. That pressure becomes obvious once you look deeper into the ENY1 itself. On paper, the specs seem solid. A 68.8 kilowatt-hours battery, around 412 kilometers of claimed WLTP range, fast charging support, comfortable suspension, family-friendly space. Everything looks balanced. But then the real-world numbers begin telling a slightly different story. In daily driving conditions, especially during colder weather or highway travel, the range drops much lower than the headline figures. Suddenly, that impressive number starts shrinking into something far more ordinary. And for EV buyers, range anxiety changes everything, because nobody cares about laboratory tests. When they're searching for a charging station late at night, but Honda made an even more interesting decision hidden underneath the car. Instead of using the Blade LFP battery technology made famous by BYD, Honda chose an NMC battery setup. And at first, most buyers won't even notice why that matters. But this small choice quietly reveals Honda's entire strategy. NMC batteries offer stronger energy, density, and performance. They help deliver smoother driving characteristics and better power delivery. But they are also viewed by some buyers as more expensive long-term compared to LFP batteries, which are often considered safer and more durable. In other words, Honda prioritized driving refinement over maximum efficiency. That sounds like a small technical detail, until you realize it perfectly reflects Honda's identity as a company. because the ENY1 was never designed to beat Tesla at acceleration. It was never designed to destroy BYD on price either. Honda seems to be chasing a completely different customer, someone who wants to enter the EV world without feeling overwhelmed by it. And strangely, that might become Honda's biggest advantage, because right now, many people are excited about EV, but also nervous about them. They worry about battery life, charging reliability, software problems, long-term ownership costs, and Honda understands fear better than most new EV companies do. The moment you drive the ENY1, that philosophy becomes obvious. The acceleration is quick, but not aggressive. The steering feels predictable. The suspension absorbs bad roads comfortably. The cabin stays extremely quiet, even at highway speeds. It doesn't feel like a machine trying to impress you every second. Instead, it feels calm, stable, familiar, almost boring, but in a surprisingly good way. And that may sound like criticism until you realize something important. Most families don't actually want excitement during daily driving. They want peace of mind. Still, the competition refuses to let Honda stay comfortable for long. BYD keeps offering more features at lower prices. Tesla continues dominating EV software and charging convenience. Toyota pushes stronger efficiency numbers. Every comparison exposes something Honda still lacks: faster charging, longer range, better value, more advanced technology, and slowly the real question changes. The ENY1 is no longer being judged as just a car. It's being judged as proof of whether traditional automakers can still survive in a market increasingly controlled by tech-driven EV companies, and maybe that's why this launch matters more than people realize. Because Honda is not just testing an electric SUV here, it's testing whether decades of trust can still compete against innovation moving at full speed. The ENY1 may not be the fastest EV, it may not have the best range, it may not dominate spec sheets, but maybe Honda understands something the industry is starting to forget. Eventually, EVs will stop feeling exciting. They'll become normal, and when that happens, buyers may stop chasing hype and start asking a simpler question. Which company do I trust to live with for the next 10 years? And if that future arrives sooner than expected, the companies that looked late to the EV race might not actually be losing at all, because once you stop looking at the ENY1 as a Tesla competitor, the entire story changes. Honda isn't trying to win the EV race the same way Tesla did. Tesla built momentum through disruption. BYD built momentum through scale and aggressive pricing. But Honda seems to be building something slower and far more patient. It's targeting the millions of ordinary drivers who still haven't fully committed to electric cars yet. The people sitting in aging gasoline SUVs, wondering if switching to EVs is worth the risk. And honestly, that audience may end up being much larger than anyone expects. What makes this more interesting is that Honda knows exactly how cautious its customer base is. Many Honda owners keep their cars for 8, sometimes 10 years or more. They care less about viral features and more about whether the car still feels dependable after thousands of kilometers. That's why Honda focused heavily on things most EV reviews barely talk about: battery cooling stability, ride comfort, predictable handling, long-term reliability. Even the regenerative braking feels intentionally smooth instead of overly aggressive. Almost every decision inside the ENY1 feels designed to reduce stress rather than create excitement. But there's another layer to this story that most people miss at first. Honda may have entered the EV market late, yet that delay also gave the company something valuable: time to watch everyone else make mistakes first. Tesla faced criticism over build quality and inconsistent interiors. Some early EV companies struggled with software bugs and battery concerns. Others rushed futuristic features that looked impressive online but frustrated owners in real life. Honda watched all of it happen from a distance, quietly. And when you look closely at the ENY1, it almost feels like a response to EV fatigue itself. A car designed for buyers who are tired of complexity and simply want something that works every morning without drama. Still, patience has a price. Because while Honda was observing the market, China was accelerating faster than almost anyone predicted. BYD especially changed the entire balance of the industry. A few years ago, many traditional automakers didn't even consider Chinese EV companies serious threats. Now BYD is selling vehicles globally at prices many competitors struggle to match. And it's not just about cheap manufacturing anymore. Battery technology, efficiency, software integration. Chinese EV brands are improving at a speed that makes older automakers nervous. That creates an uncomfortable reality for Honda. The company is strong safety systems, and they expect it